I want to welcome all the different guests, academics, rabbis, movers and shakers, folks in the Jewish world who are doing JEDI work, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. We are excited to be hosting this conversation around the need right now and in the future to ensure the longevity of Jewish institutions. My name is Chel Mandell, and I have the honor of being the program manager of the world's only graduate level program focused on Jewish studies and social justice, systemically infused with JEDI values. We feel deeply that the time is now to come and engage in this work, to learn and be trained, to really be a Jewish professional or community, bringing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion into the spaces in which we inhabit. We put together a series of conversations to lift up the voices of the changemakers in our communities. I'm going to ask you all both to maybe just introduce yourselves first, name, pronouns, and just like a snippet about who you are and what you do in the world and what brings you to this work. Go ahead, Dr. Imani.
I'm really excited to be here with you all. I know it took some organizing to get us into this room, and it feels really great to be here, side by side in the work. My name is Dr. Imani Chapman. I use she, her, pronouns, and I am calling in from the land of the Canarsie in Brooklyn, New York. And my work is to deepen our understanding of each of us as human beings and to help us, myself included, move into collective liberation inside of a solidarity frame. So in terms of how I do that work, teaching a lot of learning, coaching, looking at practices, policies, and procedures. And my most personal goal around this is to continue the legacy of my parents' work and also to prepare the world, the Jewish world, and the larger world for my own children who are magnificent and they have a lot to offer and they have a lot that they need. And so that is why I've put myself on this path, continued to put myself on this path, I should say. I'm really excited to be here.
Beautiful. Thank you. Super happy you're here to have this conversation. Yeah. Thank you. April.
Yeah, similarly, it's just a joy to be here with you both. I am Kohenet April Nicole Baskin. I am a human. I use she, her pronouns. I am a human and a leader who is in the midst of transition as we are recording this. I've been living in Dakar, Senegal for the past 4 years. And next week I am relocating back to the US, my permanent home, to be determined over the next few months. So I'm a bit in transit, which in the context of the Jewish community is not a new thing for us historically. Let's see, I have been working to advance shared power, belonging, and justice in the Jewish community and beyond for 20 years. As I mentioned, I am a Kohenet. I was recently ordained as an earth-based feminist Jewish priestess. Let's see here, a few other things I could mention. I am the owner of a company, Joyous Justice, that is rooted in this idea that we can powerfully advance justice most effectively when we engage in healing that facilitates joy and greater well-being and thriving in our lives. And that thriving is not in conflict with the justice we're seeking, but instead helps us begin to embody in the present moment the collective liberation that we are working toward. This is very much my life's work, and there is a fly who has joined me. I was hoping to just ignore it, but it really wants to be seen. I don't know their name, but they are also very excited about this conversation. And there's probably more I could say, but that is, if I think of something else, I'll say it, but that's what's top of mind right now for me. Oh, the one piece I might add very quickly, because Dr. Imani said so many brilliant things. I'm just trying to somewhat meet her where she is in this conversation in terms of the intro.
I love you, April.
And so I might also add, advancing toward collective liberation and healing, and collective healing is central to my life's work. And there are a couple core principles that I bring to that. One primarily being transformative justice, and specifically helping people get incredibly rigorous, and help supporting people and having rigorous analysis about what's happening in the world, while also having really holistic, rigorous compassion around the journeys our different peoples that we individually and collectively, our peoples, have navigated, that explains a lot of the reasons why we have challenges with certain things today, and being able to look holistically at those things, and that it's possible to approach and work with people from great love while maintaining, and that part of that great love is mindfully supporting and advancing the rigor and ethics that we bring to the work that we do. So I think I'll stop there.
Wonderful. Well, I'm happy to have you both here. A short bio, as I'll be kind of bringing the questions and facilitating this. I'm Chel Mandell. I'm a fifth-year rabbinic student at the Academy for Jewish Religion, California. I am managing this program, the JEDI program at USF, in conjunction with the Jewish Studies and Social Justice Department, a department that really shaped me 12 years ago when I was an undergrad at USF. And it's a blessing to come back and bring all the work I've done in Jewish community over the last decade, bring it back to USF, where I really found expansive understanding and meaning around my Jewish identity because of the intersection of social justice. It really opened my mind up. And I've been involved in different Jewish activist circles over the years. I launched a diversity, equity, inclusion committee at the Academy for Jewish Religion 2 years ago, our first at a rabbinical school. And I currently run a Jewish community out in Santa Cruz, California. It's called the Seam Soom Collective, where we center queer Jewish experience, and all of it hoping will lead to healing and collective liberation, as both of you also mentioned. That's the work. And as a rabbinic student, also to heal ourselves spiritually and to grow as spiritual beings. That feels really important to the work that I do. So I'm thrilled to be in discussion with y'all, and I find it really meaningful that we can make the time to discuss this important work. The first question I have is really around what brought you to doing and serving and being these justice folks in the world, right? What have you experienced or observed firsthand to inform your understanding and need for JEDI work in Jewish community space? And this could be, personal experience, what you've seen around others. I'd love to hear what brought you to this.
But I have a two-parter. My mentor, Barbara Crane Major from the People's Institute and many other places, community organizing in New Orleans, she always reminds me that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And I think there's a real imbalance of what we understand are the talents of different members of our community, Jewish, local, and global communities. And part of why I come to this is because we have a lot of learning to do, y'all. The amount of learning that happens in each of the phone calls that I'm on and communities that I'm on, a part of, invited into, or joining up with, it's just so vast, right? We don't read the Torah once and say we read it. So that's part of that's part of what I'm remembering is like, how do we surface the talents that are being blocked from contributing from certain sectors of society in the ways that they could? I mean, obviously the talent will continue to grow and be there as we honor it, but we don't have access to all of the talent because of the way that our country is stratified. The second is a little story which is when my daughter was 6, just before COVID reached the United States. We were at B'nai Jeshurun in Manhattan, attending their series Race and Us, which is available on YouTube if y'all want to check it out. And we had been to a couple of them together. The one that I am going to point to here is the one where Alana Kaufman of the JOCI was speaking about the new research and then moderating a panel. And after, as she introduced the panel, she opened up for Q&A, and my daughter stood up in a room full of people, in a synagogue that's not ours, and she raised her hand. It was everything I could do, literally, not to ask her what her question was going to be or ask her anything about it, just to let her stand in her power in that space. And I did not want to gatekeep her. I had taught her that she could do this, and she was doing it, right? She raised her hand, she got called on, and she stood up and she said, "Why are Black people in surroundings of danger?" And the room was completely quiet. And then there was some laughter. And then, thank God for Gina Green, who was like kind of the panel kind of looked in her direction, if you will. And she was like, "Okay, I'll take the mic." And she said, "Thank you for that question. This is what we are working to address." And, she rolled into a longer answer. But one of the things I noticed in that moment was that we're not ready to answer that question. We're not all equally ready to answer that question truthfully. And when I say truthfully, in part what I'm saying is, I think the discomfort that was felt in the space was as a result of what it means to know the answer to that question very clearly and to have to say it in the words and the language that a 6-year-old will understand. That's hard. It's because it's just so, you have to be so concrete and direct in a way that you can't intellectualize it. And so that's some of what I've observed, is a differential of readiness. And some of us are really ready. We've been talking about it with each other and trying to talk about it with other people. And others of us are not ready. We're not ready, and we don't want to become ready. And so that's some of what I've observed.
Thank you for sharing that. Those stories, very moving. In terms of what I've observed and experienced firsthand that's informed my approach in the context of JEDI work in the Jewish community, I'll also add, in a way that hopefully is fun, I know it can also be potentially a little annoying, that lately, one of my favorite ways, and I know the department is called JEDI, which is cool, that I like to think of, and I forgot to mention earlier when I talked about shared power, belonging, and justice, that one of the core ways that I've done that work is through DEI work. And one of my favorite DEI related acronyms that I've been using of late is DEIR, and the R standing for repair, and even potentially reparations and reconciliation is healing in practice. And in the context of, so there's a need for that, right? So in saying that, there's a need for that. And since I was young, for a lot of different reasons, particularly in my life and also in the world, as a young person, I was very sensitive to the brokenness in the world and the ways I felt that in myself. And since I was young, one of my favorite concepts, one of my favorite Hebrew words, it's a concept in English too, but I also just love the meaning, the multiple layers of meaning that it has in Hebrew. And one of my favorite words is shleimut in Hebrew, right? Which means wholeness. And it's deeply meaningful for me. And it's deeply meaningful in part because the root of it is shalom, essentially is peace. And I believe that there's an interconnectedness between peace and wholeness. And if we're bringing brokenness together, if we're filling in those gaps, if we're bridging divides that are human-made and that are not in service of our collective liberation and advancement. What brings me to JEDI or DEIR work in the Jewish community is two things, and one more, but is a deep love of my people and my peoples, and seeing how brilliant my Black and Indigenous and Jewish, my multiracial, multi-ethnic, international, global Jewish people are, is seeing how brilliant and incredible we are in all three of these facets of my identity, how each of them has been targeted for destruction over millennia, and the beauty and the food and the love and the richness that we've created. To me, from my perspective, we are unstoppable. We are miraculous. And as I saw places of brokenness within our people, I wanted us not to suffer. As I saw brokenness within the Jewish community, as someone who lives, whose identity exists in that whose identity and living spans those divides, I, from my perspective, see, whoa, this doesn't have to be our reality. I see how brilliant my people are, and my peoples, I'm afraid of Jewish people, are, and that there are resources available. And if we bring these things together, there's so much that's possible. You know, in college, I wrote a thesis about the experiences and identities of Jewish young adults of color in American Judaism. And there were various findings and things that I found, but a huge part of it for me was the conclusion that I wrote, which in a way indirectly was kind of like a love letter to our people and to Jews of color, of just like, what is possible for our world when our community gets enough healing to embrace and adore and love and lift up all of the facets of our diversity and our power. To me, it's nearly intoxicating. And that's been a huge, not the only, because part of it's also justice and responding to injustice, but a huge thing that has propelled me is, I know this feels hard, and that's why there are folks like Dr. Imani and me and a range of other brilliant leaders who can help us, including you, Chel, help folks figure out different facets of this. And it's hard, but we have people who are qualified to help us live a wildly more joyful, more resourced, more just resource, not necessarily in a financial sense, in a spiritual, relational sense that can help us feel the safety and solidarity and comfort and meaning that many of us unconsciously or consciously are seeking. So that's part of what brings me to this work, is just seeing from a young age all of the joy that that the Jewish community brought into my life, and noticing the places where folks in the community were hurt and it was hurting my family, and noticing there's a really different reality that's possible with some investment and commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Amen, amen to both of what y'all brought to this. That first question, I mean, yeah, I hear like really creating really creating space for all to be and observe and to carry forth and engage in Jewish community and Jewish space. That's what brought me to the work, is feeling like I didn't have myself reflected in those spaces, and seeing friends that were Jews of color, disabled folks, queer, trans folks, repeatedly not being able to be in those spaces, and the comments made and the looks given, it's real. And it's beautiful that there are leaders out there really trying to push this forward. And I want to, the question I have is really in relation to the idea of like DEI repair. And the question I have is like, how do we get there, right? So the question I'm thinking about is, what do you see as the biggest hurdles to getting synagogues, nonprofits, and other Jewish institutions on board with JEDI trainings and learnings? I feel like there is a lot of, yeah, we're in for it. We'll sign the thing, right? We'll sign the agreement to bring more Jews of color or queer, trans Jews on our board. But then, like, what's next? What are our hurdles that you all see, you know, in this moment and down the road, possibly?
April, you want to go?
I think in terms of the flow, that might make sense, but if you're comfortable, I think I might want you to go first because I have some pretty big thoughts, and I think hearing you will help contextualize me before I like land
Yeah,
like a little bit more. Yeah.
I'm meditating on the R. I'm still meditating on the R. And because I love language and my training is in linguistics, I'm like, it's dire, y'all. um, I think that's what Kahana April said there. And I my experience is that many Jews who are not Jews of color experience DEI, our work, as a kind of erasure, a kind of displacement, a kind of exodus, if you will, and not, maybe without man at this time, right? Like, as very upsetting, and very what about us, and by us, not necessarily taking in the whole of us, including in this country the 1 million Jews of color, but the us as it's been conceptualized by many of us for a long time, mostly focused on the Eastern European experience. So that's one piece. And another piece that I'll say, and we were talking a little bit before we came online, and I joking a little bit about how Kahana April helped to develop the principles that are used by the Jewish Social Justice Roundtable around this work, and how people always kind of go, Simcha? Right? Like, this is joyous. I think it is joyous. I think it's hard, very hard. But what could be more joyful than walking with my people toward freedom together that I know we can reach? I mean, we can reach it. So what could be more amazing than living our fullness, than offering our fullness, than sharing our fullness with others in care and in love and in respect and in dignity, right? Bringing us right back to what we just heard about Shleimut, right? So those are I think some hurdles, is some perspective shifting that needs to happen in order for us to really throw down together.
I love our alignment, Dr. Imani, and I'm so excited. I'm like a little distracted by it now. I just resonated, and not just because you said some really lovely things, and thank you, but just the alignment of what you were talking about. I just wrote, like, I mapped out a whole thing. Okay. I happen like to use the direction, so much time, so little to do. In my head, I'm like, we only have so much time on this call. You got to get together. So, okay. So in terms of what we need, this question, let me ground in this question, because my brain is just, I'm in heavy Nevi prophetess mode right now. Like, there's like a whole schema going on here. So in terms of one of the biggest, there are many big synagogues, thankfully. Thank you for laughing. One of the biggest challenges, okay, so is really aligned, is that there is a lack of repair. So I appreciate Imani lifting up that piece. There's a lack of repair around damage that's been done to different folks in our community. And I mean that holistically. So from my perspective, one of the biggest challenges that Jewish institutions have is that a number of the leaders and the institution kind of as a whole has internalized a number of false choices, and think that in order to meaningfully pursue JEDI work or DEIR, and also, and I'm excited because essentially if you're noticing a parallel between what Dr. Imani just said and what I'm saying, that's because they are deeply aligned, is that people perceive that it's a false choice, but a number of really qualified professionals in this field are bringing a more holistic perspective. Something that I used to say almost about 7 or so years ago now, in different communities when I would give a Devar Torah, a sermon at a synagogue or at a community event, and it didn't land so well, but I'm still really into it. And I just want to say it, which is that one of the core tenets within Judaism is to love your neighbor as yourself. And one of the things that I've been saying for years is that statement implies that you love yourself. And I believe our community, entirely understandably, has a hard time facing different difficult truths, because even with all of the different museums we have around the country and world for the Holocaust per se, that still has, from my perspective, scratched the surface of deeper, profound healing that our community in a variety of different ways could benefit from to heal the multi-generational 1,000+ years of anti-Semitism and the impact that that has had on our capacity. I believe at the root of many of the gatekeeping patterns and issues of mistreatment that happen in the Jewish community, under the surface, as I think about all the different times I was asked if I was Jewish or asked for my background, I believe that energetically and consciously or unconsciously, there was a subtext of, why would you want to be with me? I want to say a couple more things about this. So to further underscore this point, I usually share a couple different examples of like the famous thing that lots of Jews often laugh about. And it is funny, of Groucho Marx's statement of like, why would I want to be a part of any club that would include me? That right there is a sign of collective Jewish harm, unhealed harm. Because I can tell you, as a Black person, as a person who spent a lot of time in Christian spaces in my childhood, other groups don't necessarily have that pattern. They get invited and they think, cool, yeah, I'm part of the cool club. That's not one of their collective patterns of harm, right? So just to underscore this piece. And now this is subtle, and I need to wrap it up here in just a moment, but there's multiple different things I could share about this. And so I don't think this is fully conscious, but there's a bigger piece here that I think some people might be able to resonate maybe with a little bit more practically, where that joy that I've spoken about, that Dr. Imani has spoken about, feels hard to reach because there's chronic numbing related to what I just spoke about of collective harm that remains unhealed, and also and related to that, fear and internalized terror. I really love when Dr. Joy DeGruy talks about the enslavement of Africans and said, was there mental health assistance at any, like once they said, okay, you're free, did a group of social workers come in and say, wow, you survived this and you likely developed different habits and patterns that helped you get through this, but aren't going to be helpful when you go back out into the world? And I like to say that also didn't happen after pogroms, the Shoah, various displacements of Jewish people. It wasn't like a group of healers came in and said, let's help you process all of this, right? And whether or not you believe in genetics, just because of social learning theory, these things get transmitted. So I need to wrap up here in just a moment. But this, so, and also, again, I'm tying the pieces together of what Dr. Imani said about the erasure, the displacement, the exodus. Those things are still ever present in our different considerations. And what I would say to all of that is, we are worth fighting for. And it's possible for us to engage in programs in a way that deeply support our healing and our capacity to also be better stewards of our community and include more people. And we get to bring all of us along in this work and get to fight for that. So I'll stop there.
I want to tag on and just say, you're reminding me a little bit of a piece that Karen Propp wrote for Lilith magazine called How to Hide: Instructions from a Daughter of Survivors. And if what we're focused on is still surviving, because we haven't had the communal debriefs post each and all traumas, then it makes it very hard to think about attending to a larger whole.
And another person's pain. And what I want to say is, we get to care for your pain and our pain collectively.
Yes.
That's the oppression's message, but we actually get to choose liberation and to resource all of ourselves. Thank you so much for helping to bring that home, Dr. Imani.
Ooh, y'all are bringing it. There's like so much like I want to dig into here, and I want to keep your flow going. So I'm going to ask you another question just to keep lifting your voices up and your knowledge and your experience. And we can end with this question. Is there such thing as knowing it all? I hear from a lot of people like, we've done the work. I know we've had a training, or we have this one circle that we do, in our Jewish community. What do we say to folks who really feel like, I don't need the training, I don't need the education, or I'm doing the thing, don't worry about it? Well, how do we respond to that?
I mean, sometimes we respond by saying, okay. Okay, it's not your time, or I'm not your teacher, I'm not your person. But we also don't then sit and accompany that person, in that space. We're not going to abandon that person, but we're also going to keep moving, because that's what we actually need to do. I feel like for folks who are feeling like, I did that already, I know I'm looking at right here at a community of learners. It is not done. It's not done. It's not done. Anything I think I know, it is not done. I change. The context changes. I must continue forward. And so the idea that we've arrived, I think, maybe comes from, I would say, a competence framework that is not helpful to the healing that we're being called into, that we've just been discussing here. The work of Murray Garcia and Tervalon around cultural humility, I think, really helps us here, which is to say, I'm going to read this quote from their original publication, although they have a forthcoming book, which I'm very excited about, 1998 publication. It says, cultural humility is a process that requires humility. As individuals continually engage in self-reflection and self-critique as lifelong learners and reflective practitioners to redress power imbalances, which Gohana April has already spoken about, right? To develop mutually beneficial, non-paternalistic partnerships in care. And they're coming from the medical field, but I think calling into the spiritual care is also really important here. I am journeying, I am learning until I fall down. From a different perspective, I'll say that Jay Smooth has a video from, I think, Hampshire College TEDx, where he talks about this work like hygiene work, right? Why is today the day to brush my teeth? Because I'm trying to eat and I'm growing and they get dirty and there's buildup, and I want to be in community with people and I don't want them passing out from my breath. I mean, that's very basic, very carnal in a way. But I mean that on the individual level and on the collective level, right? When we say we have arrived, we have not. My mom, Dr. Pat Romney, would say, we don't reach justice when our institution is just, which is hard enough in and of itself. You can't have a just institution inside of an unjust world. So we carry forward together.
Again, so very excited by the resonance. Okay, so let us see here. And I'm trying to keep track of the question, remind myself. Okay, so either way, I have got a lot to say, so let's just dive in. I'm just wanting to organize my thoughts, but I'm leaning into some of my own personal re-indigenization work, and part of that means trusting what intuitively is flowing and letting my mind relax a little bit, and work in service of what's wanting to come through. So I'm going to practice that now. So something that brings me comfort when there's resistance that comes up, I love that, because as soon as I just start talking, that it came, right? And I didn't try to, that's its own little mini lesson in and of itself. So So when you ask this about organizational, and I think Dr. Imani will also, as someone who is a veteran, a professional veteran in this field, like myself. So one of the things I think when I see that organizations are resistant to this work is I've been in this work long enough for 2 decades that I know they're going to be coming back, and I just literally set my timer. Is it going to be 1 to 3 years that I'm going to get a call either directly from them or from someone I'm mentoring saying this person is having an HR or PR debacle, and or there's publicly there's this issue and they need help now. And what that speaks to is another piece that I wanted to name here. So in terms of these orgs, I'm kind of coming back to what I spoke about and also weaving with the question you just asked. We need to start building our muscles and resourcing ourselves to do the work of what Sherry Brown refers to as facing the unfaceable. Because I don't want to be rude here, but I'm going to go a little bit out on a limb here and say, I don't think I don't think Jewish leaders are consciously lying or intentionally lying when they say this, but you know that ain't true. If you pause and think about it, like I know how many people indirectly or directly or regularly over the course of my career, so many professionals experience so much fear about these issues. That means you're not well resourced at this time, right? If you're fearful, and which a number of people in our community are, if there are Jews who are feeling fearful in our society about what's happening around anti-Semitism and or are bothered by what's happening in our society at large in terms of injustice, that means there's a need for JEDI and DEIR ongoing work and resourcing and strengthening here. And so when this work is done well, what I want to say to folks again, because there's so much fear and resistance, but what I want to say is when you're working with really qualified professionals in this, when this work is done well, you do have to face some fear and move through it. But on the other side of it and during it, the fear decreases and you start to feel more resourced and more empowerment. And I think a lot of professionals, when they say this, they don't realize, and they might not even be conscious because they're so busy. Well, that was the other piece that I wanted to bring up in terms of some recommendations and things that are needed is because of the, and part of this is tied to that, whether you want to call it collective trauma or collective unhealed harm. We could also call it that if that's more accessible for any number of reasons to you, right? We have patterns around urgency. And one of the statements that I truly love from a wonderful legendary Jewish leader, an artist, Ricardo Levins Morales, is he talks about how our work ideally needs to be slow, deep, and irreversible. And that's what we all deserve to have. And at times, if for some folks, because some folks have so much urgency that I think they might freak out with the slow, I replace it. And also I want to honor Ricardo's brilliance, but with steady. If slow feels like, then to try for steady, deep, and irreversible instead of making some progress and then sliding back, which is frequently what happens until there's a big issue and then we come in and do an intervention, but we could just be steadily building progress. And that was the piece that I wanted to mention before about the fear, is that in my perspective as someone who's worked with different groups at times who have the courage and the resourcing and the safety to look into those feelings, a lot of the different efforts that stopped in 2020, from what I heard from people, is that they experienced a challenge and they got stuck and they couldn't find the resource they needed and they stopped. It wasn't that they finished the work, it was that they didn't have enough support. And so what I want to say is that all of us, and you, person listening into this right now, are deserving of getting that support and resourcing. And it is available. Might be a little tricky to find it, but it's Dr. Imani and I are right here and a range of other colleagues we know. So I think I need to wrap soon. So I'll stop there.
Thank you all. Thank you. This was really a meaningful conversation. So many thoughts and reflections are welling for me and hopefully others. And I just want to say there's this commentary by Rabbi Yeshua Ben Levi, and it says, the entire world drinks from the runoff of the Garden of Eden. y'all are the water doing the work and nourishing us and bringing this. And may we move in strength to collective liberation at large and in our Jewish community spaces. And just lots of gratitude for the work y'all are doing in the world and in connection to our program. Thank you. And
Thank
if
you
you
for
all
having
want to say anything else, please. Thank you for being here.
May you be inscribed.
Yes, yes, may you and may we all, and I'm excited for us all to continue in this work and go and grow from strength to strength.
Thank you all. I know you need
Amen.
a jump. Shabbat shalom. And
Shabbat shalom.
I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. Take good care.
Thank you.
This conversation was hosted by the University of San Francisco's SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice, better known as JSSJ. As trailblazers in formally linking Jewish studies and social justice, the JSSJ is excited to announce the first ever graduate level certificate in JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. This unique program gives professionals the opportunity to learn from both scholars and activists, offering a blend of academic study and real-world application. So, whether you want to expand your knowledge for personal development, boost skills and techniques in your classroom, or bring invaluable JEDI skills to your organization, this program will give you all the necessary tools and resources. Learn more and apply now at usfca.edu/JEDI. That's usfca.edu/JEDI.